Good morning. The first reading is taken from the first book of Samuel, chapter 3, verses 1 to 10 and 11 to 20. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Eli. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his room. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was.
Then the Lord called, "Samuel, Samuel."
And he said, "Here I am," and ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me."
But he said, "I did not call. Lie down here." So he went and lay down. The Lord called again, "Samuel."
Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me."
But he said, "I did not call my son. Lie down again."
Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him.
The Lord called Samuel again the third time.
And he got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me."
Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore, Eli said to Samuel, "Go lie down, and if he calls you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'"
So Samuel went and lay down in his place.
Now the Lord came and stood there, calling as before, "Samuel, Samuel."
And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening."
Then the Lord said to Samuel, "See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make both ears of anyone who hears or tingle. On that day I will fulfill against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. For I have told him that I am about to punish his house forever for the iniquities that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God, and he did not restrain them. Therefore I swear to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be expiated by sacrifice or offering forever."
Samuel lay there until morning. Then he opened the doors of the house of the Lord. Samuel was afraid to tell the vision to Eli.
But Eli called Samuel and said, "Samuel, my son."
He said, "Here I am."
Eli said, "What was it that he told you? Do not hide it from me. May God do so to you, and more also, if you hide anything from me of all that he told you."
So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. Then he says, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him."
As Samuel grew up, the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba knew that Samuel was a trustworthy prophet of the Lord. The second reading, taken from the book of John, the book of chapter 1, the book of John, chapter 1, verses 43 to 51. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph, from Nazareth." Nathanael said, to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." Then Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him. He said of him, he is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." And this is the word of the Lord for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
That was a fun song. Let us pray. Loving God, help us to be quiet and listen. Open our hearts so that we may hear that little wheel a-turning. Amen. About 25 years ago, I took my first in-depth personal growth course. It was called The Wall. Are any of you familiar with that course? It was kind of raging about 25 years ago. And the wall referred to the fears in our life that prevent us from moving forward, from taking that next step or that next risk. And at the beginning of the class, the instructor established the ground rules that everyone was to follow for the next 5 days. Now, I didn't think much of it until she said that we were not allowed to talk to one another during class breaks. And then she went on to say that she wanted us to talk as little as possible to anyone else, including our family members and our work associates during that week. And moreover, not to watch TV, or at that time, listen to the radio, it was 25 years ago, or read. Now, when I heard that expectation, I immediately went into panic mode, because I thrive on talking, and I thrive on getting to know other people. I am a kind of person that processes thoughts out loud. So not being able to talk to anyone for 5 days was like ripping a vital part out of my body. So I just went up to the instructor and I said, I don't think I can follow that rule. That's just too much to ask. And why are you requiring us to do that? And she looked at me with compassion, and she said, because I want you to get to know you. I want you to listen to yourself. I want you to plumb the depths of your thoughts and your feelings. I want you to find out what that inner chatter is all about. I want you to think about your life, the good and the not so good. I want you to discover your inner world. And when you do, maybe you'll find some wisdom. So I took a deep breath and I thought about what she said, and then I replied, but what if I find out that I don't like myself? What if I don't have any wisdom? She smiled. I can still see that smile. And she said, well, no time like the present to find out. Needless to say, that first half hour of the class, she managed to touch on one of my biggest fears that I never knew I had until that moment, which was, what happens if I don't like me? Can you imagine the horror of finding out that you don't like you? You're stuck for the rest of your life. There's no escape. It's like going off to the edge of a steep cliff and looking down into an abyss of darkness. So then we negotiated, the instructor and myself. She said, could you at least try to be silent that evening to see how that felt? And I told her that I would. Amazingly, what I found out during that 5-day class is that I have a big inner landscape, like all of us do. There's so much to explore inside us. And I couldn't wait for our class break so I could go off into a corner and start writing in my journal. I grew to love the quiet. I grew to love feeling the touch of the air on my skin, listening to that inner dialogue, acknowledging my fears and my emotions, my dreams and my joys. So I would say that that was the beginning of a process that helped me know how to open my heart to tenderness for me. When I get quiet, that little wheel's a turning. There's a little song in the heart. There's a deep knowing that just comes upon me, and its foundation is love, and it's that voice of wisdom. It's that spirit within. But I actually think that practicing self-reflection is a lost art. It's one that can be taught, but it's a lost art. I didn't learn it in my family of origin. I even didn't learn it in seminary. Let's face it, we spend most of our time focused outward and not inward. And it may be that like me, people are afraid that if they spent time in that inner landscape, they would find out that they don't like themselves. Now, I have a word to say about that. That's not true. It may be that we are too distracted with the rush of the world. It could be that we might find some uncomfortable emotions that we fear we can't sit with. So I can understand Eli in this story of Eli and Samuel, who we're told has grown blind to God's vision, who for whatever reasons has stopped listening to that little wheel a-turnin', who lives in a world where wickedness is wrapped around his ears and indifference is caked upon his eyes. Now, Eli is a rabbi. He's a very holy man. He's the keeper of the Ark of God, which back then that's where God lived. And he's living in a time of big corruption. He was a father of rebellious sons, and he was a priest to rebellious people. And they became distracted from the holy practices in their lives. Now, Eli might have tried to keep the faith. He might have longed to hear a word from God, a direction, a word of healing, any word, but he had lost that capacity. His heart was closed. His eyes were so weak he could barely see in front of him. And by his side was this young apprentice named Samuel, who was 12 years old, and he had lived with Eli a good 9 years. So all of his life that he knew, he had lived with this man, Eli. And Eli was like a father to him. Samuel admired him. He took care of him with love and affection. And as the story goes, it was nighttime. Samuel was lying right next to the Ark of God. And this is a box-shaped throne of the invisible king, Yahweh. And where the ark was, it was said that that's where the Lord was. And so from this ark, he calls out, Samuel. And Samuel wakes up and he runs to Eli and says, here I am, you called me. And Eli wakes up and says, I didn't call you, go back to sleep. And again, the Lord calls, Samuel. And without thinking about it, Samuel gets up and goes back to Eli and says, here I am, you called me. And Eli says, my son, I did not call you. Go back, lay down. And then it happened again. And finally, Eli begins to catch on because it had been so long since he had heard the voice of God that he had almost forgotten the possibility of that. And so the next time that little Samuel comes running to Eli, Eli says, now this time I want you to go lie down, and if God calls you, say this, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. So Samuel goes back to his mat beside the ark of God, and a voice of love is right there beside him saying, Samuel, Samuel. And with a sense of eagerness and trembling in his heart, Samuel says, Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. And then the story takes a nasty turn. God is not happy with Eli. This is Samuel's mentor. And since Eli can no longer have the capacity to open his heart and listen, it's up to Samuel to convey the bad news to his mentor and father figure, Eli. Can you imagine a 12-year-old boy being asked to speak truth to power? A 12-year-old boy is asked to trust in this voice that he's never heard before, and to trust that this is a message of love, even though it carries bad news. So we're told that Samuel could not go back to sleep that night. He laid there probably in fear of what to do. What would happen to him if he told the truth? Was it the truth? Who has the truth? This is such a moral mess. It's the kind of mess we find ourselves in today. What's the truth? Who claims the truth? Can we trust it? What do we live in? A post-truth world? A world filled with fake news? I'd like to think that the truth is like drinking hot chocolate. It's sweet. It feels good going down. I like to think that I'm the one that holds that hot chocolate. That's the kind of truth that everybody can believe in. But in our world, we have different kinds of truth claims, and lots of them are polar opposite of each other. Those truth claims are based on our history, our race, our gender, our age, our personalities, our traumas, our sexual orientations, our culture. My truth might be different from your truth. So what truth do we believe? What truth can we trust in? Some would say there's no such thing as truth anymore. And all belief is just a construct of assumptions and preferences. So like Samuel, it's so easy to be confused. Which do we follow? What do we ignore? But somehow, Samuel was able to tap into something more than our own personal truths. And I would say it's the difference between the inner mind chatter and the heart-opening wisdom. He listened to the capital T truth, the truth above truths, the kind of truth that's rooted in love and justice rather than fear, the kind of truth that's much bigger than political affiliations or culture. It's the kind of truth that comes when we're quiet, when we quiet the mind, when we open our hearts. And when that happens, I don't know if you've experienced this, but it feels like there's a download. Like, wow, we just got a download, and it's a new aha. And it's something that lands deep within. I think there's a reason why a 12-year-old boy was able to listen, while the grown-up had grown jaded. Because like Eli, it's easy to be skeptical. In our lifetimes, we might have seen too much. Maybe our hearts have been broken so many times. Maybe we've given up on hope. The twist in this story, though, is that Eli still remembered what it was like to be able to hear that voice. Somehow, we're told in this story, the lamp of God had not gone out. And God's light and hope seeped through that darkness and gave Eli enough insight to help Samuel realize who was calling and to help him respond to that call. I like to imagine that Eli remembered that the truth sets us free, even when it tastes bitter. So he gives Samuel permission to speak the truth. And in so doing, he helps shape this 12-year-old boy to grow into a man of honor, a man that can be trusted and respected. Now, I believe that that lamp of God has not gone out on us either. And at times, God seeps through our culture and our life and unclogs our ears. And I see this happening in small ways all around us. And it happens when we open our hearts and we follow that heart wisdom with curiosity. I have a friend, she's a professor, her name is Elaine Heath. She has a particular way of talking about this following and listening. She calls it having a contemplative stance in the world. And Samuel embodies this in this story. And I believe it's how we are embodying working on these community dinners together. She has 4 parts to this contemplative stance. The first action is to just show up. Sometimes it's hard to show up, isn't it? She says, show up to God, show up to our neighbors, show up to our world, show up to ourselves. And then once we show up, pay attention. Pay attention to what's there. What's going on inside of ourselves and outside of ourselves. And then she says, once we pay attention and we know what's happening, we're supposed to cooperate. Cooperate with God as God invites and instructs and corrects and encourages in whatever the situation is. And then finally, she says, we are to release the outcome of cooperating with God. We're to consciously let go of the outcome, recognizing that God is God and we are not. I think that's the hardest part of that journey, is to let go. Once we think that we've nailed it, like we're moving forward, and no, we need to release. I find in this release that when we do that, when we're able to do that, something much greater than what we thought possible seems to come forth. So I believe we've showed up in this community with the love of God in our hearts. I see us paying attention to the needs of our community and the gifts and the passions that we have. I see us cooperating with God because we're listening to love beyond our capacities. And that love is starting to captivate the entire county. Now we have 18 community partners involved in these dinners. Now again, the hardest part of this stance is releasing the outcome. Samuel did this when he told that hard truth to Eli, not knowing what would be his fate. And I think we can release the outcome of these dinners with a sense of curiosity about what might happen next. Who knows where these dinners will lead us? Who knows what might follow? The only thing we have to know right now is that God is right here, beside us, offering support and wisdom to us. All we have to do is open our hearts and listen. Amen.